So talk to us a little bit about big data. It's your thing, and it's a huge trend. Everybody's talking about it. What do we need to know about big data, and how is it going to affect organizations, competition, the way we do business?
It's amazing. I read a statistic. We produce more data. Humanity, I'm talking about humanity, produces more data, some of it in the form of terrible online videos, but
cat videos.
Cat videos, yeah, in an hour than humanity produced data-wise in like a year from the 1800s, something crazy like that. And I think it's true. So what is this big data stuff? Well, I had to look up a good definition for you, but I like this one, and this one comes out of somebody at Gartner in 2001. They defined big data as the 3 V's: volume, variety, and I believe the other one was variability or something like that. So we're awash in a lot of information. So the volume, we're collecting a lot of information, transactional data. Like I know from my work with government, we're actually collecting data on how citizens are using websites, government infrastructure all across the country, right? It's a serious amount of information. Even one user going through a government website for 4 minutes creates, which is on average how long these folks spend, creates a huge amount of information as to what they were doing, what were they seeing, where were they going, where was their mouse resting, what were they clicking on, and so forth. It's amazing. On top of that, we collect survey information. The survey information is not structured. So there's structured information and unstructured data. Structured data is information like numbers, right, where we can neatly say this is going to be an integer. Unstructured information is like this conversation, our words. They are not structured necessarily, right? There is a grammar to it, but the information sort of flows and it might go in different places. It's very variable. And we're collecting so much information that historically we haven't been able to collect that data, if only because the cost of storing that information has been enormous. But with things like cloud services, the cost of storing that information has plummeted, right? And so we're able to store that information. And so now we're at this crossroads where we're collecting all of this data, structured and unstructured, volumes, variable information sets, and now we're trying to figure out what we can do with all of it. And that's what's
be useful,
really
right?
interesting. Yes, and so my area of research is in discrete combinatorial optimization, right? Which is this fancy way of saying that we look at large data sets and find algorithmically efficient ways to analyze that information. And the interesting thing is that mathematics, we have these tools in math that allow us to sort of like statistical tools and so forth, that allow us to like analyze these large sets of information and compute what we would call scientific knowledge from it, right? Statistically valid samples, as we call them, right? What we're finding though with these much, much larger data sets is those tools don't work as well. Not because they can't necessarily handle it, but because it's such a large data set that it takes too much time to process. And so by the time the information is processed, it's not necessarily usable or actionable intelligence. So the big areas of research, at least from my perspective, happen to be in the algorithmic processing of large data sets, and how can we make use of that data that we're collecting so rapidly in a sort of near real-time basis, or as near real-time as we can. And that's the challenge, I think. Going back to your question, the challenge is, what can we do with all this data that we're collecting in a timely way? And we'll see. I think the next big frontier, you've certainly got a lot of big companies making great use of this kind of information. I've seen some interesting innovations come out of the pharmaceutical industry, just based at looking at the big data sets around medical information, medical records, drug interactions. We've certainly seen some interesting innovations coming out of the finance industry in terms of big data, in terms of fraud detection, credit scoring, ratings, risk, and so forth. I think it will be amazing, and the government, I'm sure, is using it in some ways. We're using it to try to improve the experience of citizens online. But I think some of the greater innovations in big data are going to come when small business owners could potentially make use of these large data sets in their own day-to-day operations of their business. Wouldn't it be great if all small business owners or something like that could pool their transactional information together and see what kind of trends emerge with a simple-to-use tool where they could look at all their credit card receipts. I'm thinking about like a restaurant owner here in New York, a small business owner, and see like what kinds of things are selling well, what kinds of things are not selling well. It's not necessarily a big data problem, but it is the kind of problem that these kinds of tools I think can help with.